Charles, we've got a Canadian trade war underway, but I'm not sure I understand exactly what the implications of that are. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for asking. I hope you're well. My one of my former business partners referred to Canadians as Canidiots. And, this guy, Carney, is clearly a globalist puke. Um, the manner in which he was installed as Prime Minister of Canada, previously serving as governor of the English Central Bank, the Bank of England. He's a Goldman Sachs alumnus. He's barely Canadian. And he's clearly doing the bidding of the globalists and the Chinese. Um, so this is a man who has surrendered to globalism, who believes that his reward in his political afterlife will probably be another high position at the UN or elsewhere, that he and his family might get sinecures from the Chinese and other globalist loving operations. But as far as the people of Canada are concerned, um, Canada is a cold mess. Even in the summer, it's a cold mess. And in terms of uh, holding itself out as a place to welcome capital for private entrepreneurs, that's done. There were strong arguments in Vancouver, in British Columbia, for a time for Chinese wealthy Chinese families based in the mainland to have insurance money parked in real estate in British Columbia. So specifically in Vancouver, which is, I've only been there once long ago, but it's a very beautiful place. That said, what is the argument to create the next Google or NVIDIA or you name it in Canada? There is no such argument. And the government is oppressive. It is all in for censorship. It's all in for economic feudalism. I call it F-U-T-I-L-I-S-M, feudalism. Um, and this is before we start considering the impact of robots replacing human labor,
They have a
which,
great
is
Olympics event with the robots over the weekend. They're running into walls.
right. And it's kind of like, I'm aware of somebody who had a very high level position at a big publicly traded company who was concerned. He would avoid going to meetings out of fear that somebody would notice that he had this high position, but he really wasn't doing anything. And that's kind of Canada. I mean, Canada is in the G7, I believe. There are there's Canadian participation in many multilateral organizations at a higher level than they deserve. And why should Canada have a disproportionate say in global anything? It's a large country in terms of territory. It has a lot of fresh water. It does have a stake in the Arctic treaties, I would argue, but beyond that, uh, they're an amazing pain in the ass. The government, in particular, the Quebec government. Carney apparently gave some speech. I sent you the Zero Hedge piece responding to Trump's tariffs in French. Like the French-speaking Canadians are a tiny percentage of the total country. And you look at that country and you say, this is there, but for the existence of the actual border, is a country that should be broken up. If the French want to have, this is what happens when you have aggressive minority viewpoints, trying to enforce that viewpoint on the majority. If the French-speaking people of Canada want to have a place where everybody speaks French, okay, form your own new nation,
Isn't it
and
called
good luck.
France?
It's called Quebec. It's called make it Quebec. The government, le gouvernement of Quebec. And yes, they've got great food there, and the strippers can actually in Quebec apparently they're allowed to go bottomless and topless.
You've been
And they
told.
have, yeah, I've been told, yeah. and, and the liquor taxes I think are either higher or lower than average, but whatever. It's not a place that's ever going to attract, it's never going to compete in the pre-existing world of industrialization, let alone the one going forward. I started to tell the story. Here I am in Thailand, in southern Thailand, and I should report to people, by the way, if you're seeing reports of bombings in southern Thailand, they're not where I am yet, and they're unlikely, I hope, to be here. But so I'm safe. But in the airport, in the various stores around here, in the fast food restaurants in remote southern Thailand, they replace cheap workers with machines. You've got, robots, cleaning machines, vacuuming the airport in Phuket and Hat Yai and elsewhere. And that's now. The arguments that Carney is supporting and the globalists are supporting to promote public sector workers at high pay with no accountability, pensions that you can't get in the private sector. That's just destroying any argument to bring forward-looking capital into Canada. So, I mean, the guy, I don't know what he thinks he's doing. I would guess somehow he's being paid a lot of money. But Zero Hedge has a piece asking the question: has Canada signed its death warrant, economic death warrant? And I sent you the one-word answer: yes.
Just replace Canada with robots.
Yeah, make it. It's sad.
Do they have
It's really.
skiing robots yet? Crash into things on skis?
I'm sure they'll come up with that too. But in terms of, I remember I made the mistake once of going into Canada, and it said on a business trip, and they said, do you have any business materials with you? And I thought what that meant, I had presentation materials, and I thought I had to go through this line. The third degree that I was given by some asshole, in customs over what's this piece of paper? Why does it say this? Listen, I voluntarily went through this line. This is a private business negotiation. Nothing has happened yet, formally or legally. It's just a discussion. So there's a very negative attitude in Canada. And you think about that. I mean, how many businesses succeed where, for consumer goods, Canada, 33%, the magic 33, of Canada's exports of consumer goods go to the United States. So we're their largest customer. Where has it ever worked in business that what you do is you persecute punish your largest customer, right? I mean, and why should we tolerate this anymore? I think Trump should go for it. I'd raise it to 500%.
Well, but
if they
so
don't.
Charles, but what do you anticipate? Because I think most people we hear about this and it's like, okay, but what's going to happen now to us as American consumers as a result of this? Is prices higher?
People have options, right? If you really need to buy, I don't even know if Molson's is owned by Canada anymore, but if you need to buy a Canadian product and the price of it goes up a lot, guess what? There are other beer companies.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really cares about
it's not
Molson.
right. I mean, and more to the point, it's kind of Canada is following in the UK's footsteps here. Is really cheesing me off, right? I mean, why? What have we done to deserve this kind of treatment by a country that should really be, waking up every morning and saying, how can we make sure that America is still welcoming the vast amount of Canadian goods that we sell to the American consumer? By the way, there are also, for a long time in Canada, there have been unfair trade practices going back a long time. I think of paper, on timber, on other products, where to protect Canadian local industries, they punish American companies trying to export into Canada. I really would start by saying, you know what, Canada, you're in the shit seven. Forget about the G7. You're out. You're not coming.
That
Just
would be a
if you
great
want to have a G7,
coalition.
okay, here's a simple choice. You have a G7 meeting. If Canada is still a member, we're dropping out. Then what are you going to do? Talk to France and Germany about how to build up your military might to start World War III? I mean, this is really. I mean, Carney has, I'm sure, the McGill University Faculty Lounge and other leading universities worldwide are applauding what Carney is doing, standing up to Orange Man, who's bad. But I mean, he's really it's beyond. If you can have a process like this, preceding the idea that Joe Bite Me was actually able to pretend to be president when anybody close to him knew that he was couldn't even manage his diapers. And then you decide peremptorily, you know what, we'll just have shoehorn the vice president in, no primaries, no nothing. And that's in essence what they did with Trudeau out, Carney in, same game plan. I thought the left was all into protecting democracy. We're promoting the interests of the Zelensky guy who canceled his election, whose family is stealing money right and left. The Canadians are all in for that. They're all in for forever war in Ukraine, in part because many Bandera supporters, Stefan Bandera supporters, were taken out of Ukraine, out of the Soviet Union, and spirited into Canada. So there's a very heavy diaspora of Ukrainian Canadians that are all in promoting this war. I mean, I think we just have to wake up and understand that where in the past Canada and U.S. had very strong, positive, mutually beneficial relationship, that's over. Carney is an asshole, and the Canadian and Doug Ford, the guy in Ontario, I think the equivalent of a governor, about another asshole.
Carney, according to the New York Times, says Canada is at war with the U.S. I mean, how's that going to go?
Not well. Not well.
Powerful
Given,
speech, they say in the New York Times.
of course, the New York
Red.
Times.
It's a Joe Biden red special.
Right. The New York Times, the paper that always sides with against America's better interests. Any chance they have at this point to obstruct Trump, to characterize moderate conservatives as far-right extremists. Meanwhile, one of my children's friends was working in the New York Times and explained the process by which they put the paper to bed. There's a big room. It's kind of like a trading floor, and all the people who are competing for space on the front page and elsewhere, are yelling and screaming and pushing and trying to get as much. And they will invite friends of the paper in to witness that. And this guy was saying, if you weren't such a conservative, I would invite you in. I said, I was about as much interest in doing that as amputating my right hand. I don't care about how the New York Times is put to bed.
Charles, what about this? Former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and a toilet plunger went viral in home hardware. So he's doing well.
Yeah, isn't he dating Katy Perry now or something?
Allegedly.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is ridiculous. He's like a douchebag on TikTok.
Right, but if you think about it, the great American experiment, which was copied by other countries, was to rid in America to lift off the yoke of what people believed was a despotic king and a despotic parliament that was trammeling the rights and freedoms of residents on the American mainland. And looking at Western governments now, how many of them are doing exactly the same thing? L'état c'est moi. This Carney has decided that in his imperial wisdom that this makes sense for him. Apparently, the trade talks were close to a compromise, and he said, "Fuck you. I can get a better deal." If I were Trump, I would teach this motherfucker a lesson. I would make I would eliminate the support for the Carney government, which I think we could do pretty easily. And I also would encourage Alberta to secede. And as far as this idea, when you go into Canada, across all of Canada, every sign has French and English with it. What are we going to do in New York? How many different languages do we have in New York?
They pretty much do, though, Spanish and Chinese now.
No. Every government sign. You're at the airport, customs, douane, whatever.
They have a lot of Spanish and Chinese.
Yeah, again, New York. I mean, New York is it's sailing down the path to economic oblivion.
But wait, let's stay on Canada before we get to the economic oblivion of New York. Trump says Canada wants the benefits of being a U.S. state. He should just start calling him Governor Carney.
I think I just let him twist in the wind. Right? They think they have a lever. They do provide water-based power into New York State, actually, Ontario Hydro. But they have a desperate problem. Like, I learned this in 2000, almost 20 years ago, that the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund has a disastrous arrangement with retired teachers where the rate of return on the retired teachers' investments is guaranteed by the government. But there's no way you can do that. And the population of active teachers is shrinking relative to the population of retired teachers. So the contributions that are coming into the pension plan from the teachers, plus the available rates of return, are just not enough to make that logic work. And that's written across other sectors, vast sectors of this highly government influenced nation. That but for its supply of land, natural gas, and oil, name one Canadian company that is an innovator in technology.
Well, Nortel, but the Chinese stole it. So, but Charles, what about the fact that this is saying crude oil is over 100 billion? Won't this exacerbate gas prices that are already going up because of Iran?
Venezuela?
Just take it.
No. The point is, there's plenty of crude. We have, a lot. I believe the United States is an exporter of crude. So I mean,
Why are we
again,
importing crude oil from Canada if we're exporting crude oil from the United States? Doesn't make sense.
it does. You can do both, but we're net an exporter. So if we could just pump up as prices rise on the world market, it makes ever more, greater and greater sense to exploit reservoirs inside the United States that have not yet been tapped fully. So no, Canada does not have. I mean, we have the winning hand. They have poked the bear here, and more to the point, they're just fucking annoying, right? These are annoying. This is an annoying government that is just that is playing along with the Get Trumpy movement, to be popular in the faculty lounges around the world. It makes no sense what he's doing, and he won't prevail.
It's the first time anything like this has happened, right?
No, we had been at loggerheads with Canada in the past as well. I forget the guy's name, but there have been various and sundry pain in the ass Canadian prime ministers, including Trudeau,
Yeah.
father and son. So it's kind of it's a relationship that maybe we should have a divorce. Maybe it's time to put a big strong border across the north.
Wasn't Pierre Trudeau the first basically guy to get down with Mao?
Yeah, he visited Mao before Nixon.
Yeah. So what the hell is that about?
Well, if you're sitting there as China and you have a landmass that's large, but you have a population that's what, many times the size of the Canadian population spread over a smaller landmass, I think, than Canada. You look at that and you say, someday we're going to need this land in Canada. So let's lay a beachhead. Let's send our families over there. Let's let them, become entrenched in Canada. And when the time makes sense, we'll make our move there. So again, this is a policy that's stuck on stupid.
The other thing is, you were talking about Vancouver. I was in Vancouver just a few years ago visiting the unfortunately departed David Hawkins. And I don't know, sometimes, like I remember in 2007, just walking around this neighborhood, I was like, there's an awful lot of bank branches around here.
Right.
And then the whole thing exploded. In Vancouver, I was like, what the hell is with all these Chinese insurance companies? Like, what is that? But then here we have this thing, which is saying Chinese triads, which is the mafia, launder billions through Vancouver buying luxury real estate and cars.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's basically a very dangerous situation there, and there's similarly a dangerous situation in the south in Mexico, where that country, I think, is heavily influenced by drug cartels. Unfortunately, XF and our military are trying to take them out, but I think they have very substantial influence over the government of Mexico. So, we have problems inside our borders. We have problems with our, the geographically closest two neighbors, large neighbors. And frankly, I think good on Trump for staying firm here.
Well, Mark Carney specifically said that, Canadian sovereignty is off the table or something like that. I don't know.
Well,
We'll have to see what Trump is going to do.
well, when you have to say that, it should go. It's like it's obviously an issue. I mean, if you were to break apart Canada just without regard to the law and just focus on economics and say, all right, what is Canada? What is the economic proposition of Canada? People like to say that Russia is a gigantic gas station, with some ancillary
Masquerading as a
businesses.
country. Yeah.
Right, and that's Canada. It actually has oil and gas and also minerals and mining. But beyond that, and that those sectors can produce a fair amount of positive returns economically speaking, assuming they are environmentally responsible in the way they take the resources out of the ground and water. But the balance, I mean, you've got banking. There's no really significant bank in Canada compared to American banks, um, nor will there ever be one, because in Canada the population is so small that they can't get the kind of free deposits that you get in America at J.P. Morgan from people putting money in their checking accounts. We're 10 times the size in population of Canada.
Yeah.
So, what else do you have there? If you're a Canadian student, why would you want to stay in Canada other than maybe you have family there? But, given a chance, if you're somebody in tech, um, you want to roll with Elon Musk. You don't want to roll with, whoever's a tech genius in Canada. As for venture capital and private equity, I don't think there's much up there. Um, so what do you have bureaucracy at the wazoo. You want to be a servant, you can do that. You want to be a ski instructor, you can do that. Play hockey. But I mean, it's a backward-looking economy. At least China is trying to modernize.
Well, I mean, isn't it true if we just basically took over Alberta, we could have all the gas and also the cattle ranching? So you don't need the rest of Canada. There's some sort of beef over beef. Trump is announcing a move to lift ground beef tariffs to lower prices. But of course, people are
And,
pissed.
and
Somebody asked him,
domestic beef producers are unhappy. But anyway, again, if you're sitting there and the American economy is heavily leveraged, which is a problem, 40 trillion now in debt. But it is a gigantic economy. And it does have an Elon Musk and people like him, people who literally are at the forefront of private sector economic activity and history. Who's going to stand toe to toe with Musk in Canada?
who's that Weasley guy who's friends with Bill Clinton from Toronto Dominion Bank? Frank.
Frank Schuster is not
Yeah.
exactly a tech titan.
No, Schuster. He's got no juice, Charles. Well, we still have a lot more to talk about. I want to show you something interesting that I've discovered within the Cash Foundation. We should start calling it the Cash Money Foundation because that's really what it is. But we're going to be continuing in the First Amendment Forum. People can join us there on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I did a whole show earlier about Kash Patel's country music sensation girlfriend and her possible lawfare against Sam Parker, who's a guy I really don't care for. Here's Canada in the robot Olympics, Charles. Falling flat in there. Look at take it out on a stretcher.
That's art imitating life.
It's crazy. The robot Olympics, it seems every single robot explodes at the end. So they run along. One of them beat Usain Bolt, but
Really?
yeah, they can run very fast, but they cannot stop, which is why they have to end by crashing. Oh, this one's just doing a little dance. That one stopped. I don't know, weird. Just stopped and do a little dance there in the middle of the race. Robots are still a bit crazy, but we'll be back in less than 5 minutes. Stay with us, everybody.